community. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Beloved community. Now, most of you, if you're familiar with the phrase at all, associate it with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's safe to say that this is one of the central guiding principles to his theology, the beloved community. Interestingly, the term was actually coined by a philosopher in the earliest 20th century at Stanford University by the name of Josiah Royce. Royce's goal was to define a way of living that focused on the positive rather than living in the negative. Focusing on love as the more powerful force for change rather than fear. But what does that really mean? Well, we've already received a pretty clear indication to the introduction to the term beloved in the Time for All Ages. It wasn't that great imagery, right? And then our meditation time gave us the opportunity to seek and embrace that uniqueness that defines each one of us deep inside. And hopefully we each got at least a little glimpse into the uniqueness of the others around us. That part of us, that unique sense of self that truly defines who we are. Our true sense of being. Rather than various doings of actions and conversation. That is the us we know we are. And as we heard earlier, that deep inner you is indeed unquestioningly lovable and deeply loved. Now that's a great feeling, isn't it? So let us turn our attention to community. So what is community? Well, community is typically thought of as a social unit, typically composed of human beings who typically have something in common. So what sort of commonalities? Well, often similar values and beliefs, or similar mission and activity, or maybe relationship or geography, to name a few. So what about your community? Think about all the people in your life, in your community. Wow, that's probably a lot of people, right? How many of us have community members in another city? How many of us have community members in another state? In another country? On another planet? Just checking, okay? Just checking. Didn't want to leave anything out. So are those people all in just one large community for you? Well, that would certainly be one way to look at it, and yet it might be challenging to think about them all together in a single group like that. However, with a little thought, I imagine that each of those earlier categories, similar beliefs, values, activities, mission, relationship, etc., splinters off a somewhat different set of people from the entire pool of members. There's likely some crossover, and that's fine. The point is, we are really members of multiple communities, aren't we? So what would our nearest or smallest community be? You. Exactly. Exactly. The community of one. The ultimate of minorities. You are realistically, uncountably outnumbered on the planet and in the universe. So what would our next smallest community be? Well, it starts to vary a little bit. Okay? Typically it's a family of choice or your most intimate long-term relationships. Or it could be something very strong that's only been going for a little while. But typically, it's a very strong relationship. Now, while these two communities we've talked about have different members, it's likely that they share one or more common areas of interest. Now, from here, the options broaden a little bit. At the next level of our community scale, it's quite possible that we go to another group of members that come together with similar interests or commonalities, which probably has, again, some crossover with at least one of the previous communities. However, at this point, things may shift to perhaps a geographical boundary, something that defines the community perhaps in terms of your immediate neighbors, or your street, or your neighborhood, your town, or your city, and so on. When we look at it piece by piece, we notice that there are really many communities of which we are a member. Interacting with all those different groups is often something that leads us to a richly fulfilling life. All those different commonalities bringing people together in work, passion, and play. And as we've seen, some of these communities of mutually shared interests are communities of choice, right? You and others have chosen to participate in the same sphere. However, there are also communities that are defined by arbitrariness, like geographical boundaries. These other communities are what could be called communities of circumstance. So what's the challenge with that? Well, for one thing, you don't share all the commonalities in the community that you might in communities of choice. And where there are differences of approach to things, there's inevitably potential for conflict. So, consider the absolutely unique backgrounds that every single one of us brings with us. We each have our own special database or encyclopedia of experiences and knowledge upon which we make our decisions every day. Given the same information in the same circumstances, what is the likelihood that two people will react or decide identically in, say, one of the three big issues like money, politics, or religion? That's going to be slim, right? Now, for sure, there may be points of similarity in the outcome. However, the uniqueness of the individual creates a unique response. To be clear, we are, each one of us, human beings, naturally endowed with agency over our own selves and blessed with free will. We examine the world around us. We weigh our needs, wants, and desires against our responsibilities and resources. And we exercise free will when we take that next step forward. Now, even from our own point of view, do we always make the best choice for the near term or the far term? Oftentimes, perhaps. We would certainly hope so. And on the other hand, really, perhaps not so much. Okay? Certainly, we each have acted in the manner that seemed appropriate at the time, based upon our collection of experiences and knowledge. If we want things to improve, though, consider belovedness. So for a moment, let's just shift our focus and let's think about the Unitarian Universalist Church. It is well understood that ours is not a creedal church. There is no set creed, no canonical list of beliefs established in some solemn contemplation and consecrated by assent of church leadership, of which we make an oath to share. Indeed, for each person in this room, there is likely a unique set of beliefs and faiths upon which we each positively in our own view, operate our lives. We are, however, a covenantal church. There are 7 principles that we hold which lay the foundation for how we choose to interact with one another. The common orientation that these create makes an atmosphere of openness and mutual respect, welcoming and acceptance of each other's differences without malice. I draw your attention to our very first principle: the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Say it with me. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. That feels good, doesn't it? Feels right. We know that under every single choice that is made in people's lives, there is a human being. A beautiful, unique individual that has an overwhelming abundance of inherent worth. And deserves the respect for the inherent dignity that they possess. When we look out upon our church community, one might say, a beloved community. Think of your nearest and smallest community again. You. Again, the ultimate minority. Yet, you have inherent worth and deserve respect for your inherent dignity, even from yourself. Think of your next nearest community. Again, typically a family of choice or close, intimate relationships. Each member having inherent worth and dignity. Now think of your next community. Either a community of choice or circumstance. Think about each of the members of that community. They too each have inherent worth and deserve respect for their own inherent dignity, even when they sound and or behave like dingbats. People sometimes don't do the things that we would prefer that they do, right? They might do things that we think are unwise or short-sighted. From the things that feel huge to the things that are insignificant, people will occasionally, or perpetually, believe in or say things that just rub our fur backwards. It can be a very uncomfortable feeling, being in company or earshot of that kind of thing. Is it wrong to care deeply about something? No. Is it wrong to have a difference of opinion? No. Is it wrong to have opposing points of view or opinions? No. And yet, it is those very differences of opinion, that divide communities of circumstance, and frankly, even some communities of choice. Some of these communities even fall apart in one way or another. Within these 4 walls, or more if you include the yellow house, we have agreed to treat each other with respect to our individual inherent worth and dignity. We accept and respect each other universally for the inherent goodness that resides within each and every one of us. We see and respect that special center space in each other. When I was young, there was an extremely popular phrase that stuck with me. And it went, "I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Now, my recollection kind of exudes a youthful, I'll live forever bravado. I think it reflects that view of common respect for differing opinions. If I were to update that phrase, I might say, I don't have to agree with you, And in a world of free will, I don't believe you should be silenced for your beliefs. However, it is these very differences in beliefs that are the source of so much angst in the world, in our communities. People who otherwise would be BFFs metaphorically spit at one another when they cross paths. What does that do to community? What does that do to their inherent worth and dignity? And perhaps more importantly, what does that do to yours? You may deeply believe that your point of view is unshakably founded in fact, logic, and reason, whether it is or not. And they may have a similar deep belief about their own point of view. Can we be willing to set the contentious emotion, the need to be right, aside for a moment? Can they do the same? Well, what would that take? Who will offer the first sign of peace? If there can be no calm conversation, is the only recourse suppressed or expressed violence? Violence either in emotions, words, or actions. This past semester of the seminary, I took a course entitled How Our Stories Shape Our Leadership. This was an extremely powerful class for me, as I truly began to open up in a new way, and to look at my own story and how my background truly shaped the things that I saw every day. More on that in a bit. In this class, we explored how all the unique things in our individual history perpetually influence our views and our decisions. As part of the class, we looked at a project called StoryCorps. Has anyone heard of StoryCorps? Excellent, excellent. So the premise of the project is that each and every one of us has a story to tell. Our lives are stories to tell. The premise of the project, right. So the stories are about who we are, what we've experienced, our life path of footprints on this planet. StoryCorps goes around the country and makes recordings of people telling their stories in response to a series of well-crafted questions. We had an assignment to find a person in the community that we wanted to get to know better, or someone we wanted to better understand that held differing points of views, and ask them various questions about their life. And these were fairly straightforward questions like, what was the neighborhood like where you grew up? Who were your role models or heroes while growing up? What was the best compliment you ever received? And what made it so memorable? And can you tell me about one of the most difficult moments of your life? We all travel different paths. The key here is that we weren't just looking for the answer to fill in a blank. We encouraged our subjects to tell us their stories. As I listened to what was shared with me, a whole new perspective on that person opened up. In my assignment, I began to see things that made up much of his life, influenced him in ways much differently than my own story influences me. I developed a whole new appreciation for who that person was. At his core, too, he was beloved. As I look around this room, I know that each and every one of you has inherent worth and an inherent dignity that deserves respect. And isn't that true of everyone? Regardless of our beliefs or their beliefs, or even actions. We are all on this big blue marble, waltzing our way around the sun, choreographed in circles with the other nearby planetary bodies. Each of our communities, from the smallest to the largest, is greatly important in shaping our individual waltzes and dances, our journeys, our lives, past, present, and future. So shift your attention now to those members of our communities that challenge us to one degree or another. Perhaps they don't think like you, have the same values on the same issues as you, or their general behavior is just abrasive. Does everyone have at least one person spring to mind? Okay. Have I been unclear? I don't think so. All right. In fact, I'm sure that there's probably a person for each of us that is in that category that is within 15 miles of this place right now. Am I right? So I have a challenge for you. And it is this. Pick one such individual that's within about 15 miles. Over the next couple of weeks, find a time in both your schedules and invite this person out for a cup of coffee, tea, or some such. And make it clear that you want to have a safe and non-confrontational time together. And whatever hot-button differences you two may have, you each agree to leave them at home. And when you meet, see their belovedness and feel yours while you visit. Talk with them about who they are from the standpoint of a beloved individual. Simple things that are safe for each of you. And once you can see the other person as a human being, perhaps down the road, you can talk about, or at least acknowledge, your differences, rather than become polarized around them. For those of you that want to know more about the StoryCorps project and perhaps view some sample questions, these are available online at storycorps.org. StoryCorps, one word, Corps, C-O-R-P-S. While we're on the subject of this particular class, we learned a process for exploring our own stories in a safe and reflective way within small groups. This was probably one of the most powerful experiences that I've had to date in my education. If there's enough interest, I would like to organize the process of a regular story sharing here in our congregation based on this model. If you think that might be of interest to you, please let me know and I'd be happy to share more information on that process. So, the beloved community begins with each and every one of us, one relationship at a time. Martin Luther King Jr. referred to the beloved community as radical definition of our relationships, a type of love that transforms opponents into friends. May you go forth and transform your communities, one beloved person at a time.